Okay, thank you everyone. We'll commence tonight's meeting. I'd like to acknowledge that this meeting is held on Bungalow land and we give thanks for the use of this land. Mighty God, we humbly beseech thee to grant thy blessings upon the works of this council, to direct and prosper its deliberations to the advancement of this city and for the true and lasting welfare of the people of this municipality. I will now read the obituary notices and then we'll have a silence to pay our respects. I'd like to pay our respects to George Heading, Jared J, Patricia Butler, Deirdre Rowe, Justin Robinson, Peter Haziel, Lorna Ferdinands, Susan Mitchell, Barbara Jarrett, Bruce Wisdom, Arthur Cass, David Rogers, Patricia Bone, Michelle Bland, Terence Simmons, Lorraine Burke, Ronald Petty, Margaret Blushke, Brian Jones, Patricia Duffy, and Sandra Baker. Thank you, councillors. Item 4, attendance records. We have 2 apologies tonight from Councillor Pond and Councillor Santuzzi. Of absences, there are none. Item 5, declarations of members' conflicts of interest. Councillors, are there any? If you could please let me know. Councillor Knox.
Need to turn the microphone on.
Use the one in front of you.
I'll have a perceived conflict.
Just through the Mayor, just for the purpose of the public record, tonight there will be no discussion regarding the Triple Y building. So whilst you declared a perceived conflict of interest, Councillor Knox, that won't be an issue this evening.
Right. I'd like to now go to, as there are no other conflicts. And I also would like to just mention that Councillor Stupos is attending this meeting on. Thank you, Councillor Stupos. Item 6, minutes of the previous meeting from the ordinary council meeting held on the 19th of April 2022. There's a recommendation there. Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Simpson, thank you. All those in favour? Thank you, that is carried. Item 6.2, confirmation of the minutes of the special council meeting held on the 2nd of May 2022. May I have a mover for that recommendation, please? You need to use your microphones, councillors, to vote. Thank you. Councillor Westerman, thank you. Second. Councillor Marshall, thank you. Councillor Marshall. Questions or discussions? I'll ask for a show of hands. All those in favour? Excellent, thank you. That is now. Okay. Item 7, deputations and presentations. There are nil. Item 8, petitions, there is also nil. Item 9, matters adjourned and deferred. Is there 9.1, the resubmission of report Whyalla building? As listed there is your item 19.2.1. Item 10, public question times. This evening, we have given the opportunity to the community as per our council legislation that for the members of the public can come and speak to our annual business plan if they choose. And we allow an hour's time for that to occur. So as there are no members in the public that wish to speak to that tonight in the chamber, we'll continue on, but that allowance is for 1 hour. Right, thank you. Item 11, elected members' activities. They are up on the screen. And while they are being shown on the screen, I'll ask any of the members if they'd like to speak to anything they have attended over the last month. I'd also like to acknowledge Deputy Mayor Stone for covering me when I was away on bereavement leave, so thank you for that, Councillor or Deputy Mayor Stone. So does anyone want to speak to any of their activities? Just take that as read and understood. Right. Okay, that's fine. Thank you, councillors, for attending those last month. Okay. Item 12, 12.1, the Audit Committee meetings minutes from the 9th of May 2022. The recommendations that council received a note of minutes of this particular meeting. Someone would like to move that recommendation, please. Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Sorry, Councillor Stupos. Seconding, sorry, apologies. Thank you, Councillor Stupos. Thank you for that. No questions or discussions around that? Ask for a show of hands for them to be passed. All those in favour? Excellent, councillors. Thank you. Right, item 13, 13.1, Officer CEO's Executive Ordinary Reports. We'll start with the 13.1.1, the CEO's Action Report. We'll take it as read. Did you want to speak to any of that particular CEO? Just take that as read and understood. Are there any questions from any councillors? Councillor Knox, are you?
No, I'm just going to move it.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll just go to moving it. Thank you, Councillor Knox. Councillor Westerman will second that. Thank you, Councillor Westerman. Ask for a show of hands. All those in favour? Excellent. That is carried. Item 13.1.2, the Powerline Environment Committee call for nomination. The council will nominate a person for a position on the Powerline Environment Committee for a 3-year term and note the report under reference. CEO, did you want to speak to this if anyone you would think would be suitable or has shown interest in the position? And if not, is that okay for us not to nominate someone? I'll leave you to speak to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. No, there's no requirement for council to put forward the nomination. To date, I've not received any indication from any councillors that they've got a particular interest. But certainly it's now open for any councillors to nominate if they wanted to be considered for that nomination. Yes.
Or a staff person. But it did say in the report that they have to be or experienced in this particular area. So that's incredibly important. Not just a nomination, you can just give it has an important purpose, this role. Okay, so I take that there is no nominations from this particular chamber because we perhaps don't have the right person for that particular role or someone that's showing some interest. So we'll just let that one move that. So we'll move and second that there is not to be a nomination. Yeah, thank you. So the recommendation that a person that can be moved. Thank you by Councillor Marshall. Thank you. Okay, all those in favour? Excellent. Thank you, Councillor. Okay, 13.1.3, the Local Government Transport Advisory panel, and calling for nominations there. So it's a similar story, this particular nomination. CEO, have you received any interest or from anyone? No, that not be the case. Okay, thank you. So is there are no other nominations, particularly from our, it's obviously a statewide request. Sure, that's not a problem. Okay, so we will not be nominating anyone from our council, so I'd like to have someone move that that be the case, but we've just noted that. So Councillor Marshall, Councillor Knox, thank you. Those in favour? Excellent, thank you, councillors. 13.2. We'll go straight into point 1, which is the budget review for 21-22, quarter 3. Right. Did any staff want to speak to take this as read at this point?
I'd
CEO?
Yes, through the Mayor, just given the importance of the budget, I think it would be appropriate if our Manager of Finance just provided a brief synopsis of the results to date.
Yeah, thank you, Brian.
Thank you, through the chair. So I guess the main story out is that the overall budget position of council is actually fairly for the current year, other than a couple of one-off items that I'll explain. So the federal government this year has decided a 3 quarters of the financial assistance grants in advance. Over the past few years, they've always paid 2 quarters in advance. So in effect, each year we've got 1 year's worth of the grants. This year they've caretaker mode. They decided to pay 3 quarters of the grants, and so we'll actually, in effect, get 5 quarters of the grants this year, and actually be more calculation. So what that has done is actually impacted our operating result positively by an amount, which is about $1.4 million extra that we got this year. And at some point in the future, that will likely reverse itself, as well as the other 2 quarters that's going to happen. But you will see that our adjusted operating result basically takes out that impact and shows that we're still actually in a deficit position. So that surplus position shown in the budget review is actually just due to that timing difference. And as normal during the budget review, we've also picked up the projects carried forward that we due to updated project schedules, that sort of thing. We've picked up the majority of those projects that won't be completed this year, but will be completed next year. We did have a very large capital program this year, over about $25 million. And it was always known that some of those projects will continue delivery into next year. So we've done a best estimate of the split between this year and next year for those projects. And so that obviously drops that operating result for this year, and those programs will occur next financial year instead. As I said, mostly overall the position was fairly consistent, with the exception being as well the airport result is slightly worse, with we're not able to offset that with other council budgets, and that's due to us the impacts over the last sort of December to March on passenger numbers, and the updated projections of passenger numbers for this financial year. I haven't taken any other questions.
Thank you, Brian. So there seems to be no questions. I'm asking someone to move that recommendation, please. Thank you, Councillor Simpson, and Councillor Marshall has seconded that. For show of hands, all those in favour? Hands all those in favour? Yep, that's carried. Thank you. Thank you.
I had a couple of questions.
Oh, I didn't see you put your hand up.
That's all right.
No, do you want to go back? We can go back and ask the questions.
Look, I can leave until confidential. It's to do with the council building.
Okay, yep, that's fine.
All right. Tough.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Strickles. I didn't see you put your hand up, that's why I didn't ask you to speak. Thank you. Okay, so that has been moved. Thank you. So, item 13.2.2.
Are we going to move the motion?
Sorry,
Are we going to move the motion on 13.2.1?
you did that.
Oh, did we? I didn't raise my hand.
Oh.
Sorry.
That's why I said there's a mover and a seconder, and then ask people to raise their hand.
Right.
Can you hear me okay, Councillor Stupos?
It cuts in and out at times.
Okay. Right, thank you. I'll make sure I'm speaking a bit louder. Okay. Right. So item 13.2.2 on page 74, the Treasury Management Policy Review. Did you want to speak to that? Thank you, Grant.
Thank you through the chair. So just briefly, this is a review of 2 years of our current treasury management policy. It has been operating quite well and is quite a contemporary, modern sort of treasury management policy. The only change we're suggesting is one was actually discussed at the audit committee 2 years ago when we originally adopted it, was just upping the target range for the fixed interest rates. So that basically we have a balanced approach to fixed and variable interest rates. So the goal now will be 50% of loans to be fixed over an average year, with a range of between 30 and 70 to allow for timing differences.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I'll ask someone to move that recommendation. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Second. Show of hands. All those in favour? Thank you. That's okay. Right. Item 13.2.3.
Soto's trying to.
Councillor Stupos. You're on mute if you wanted to speak, or you're just voting on that particular recommendation.
Yeah, no, you don't ask for discussions. I can't hear you. With regards to that policy, I noticed that it handles the risk assessment on rate fluctuations, etc. Is there any particular reason why there's no risk on borrowings? Why there's no highs and lows? Yeah, I just can't work out why we have an assessment on only having so much of our funds in fixed and so much in variable. But what about borrowing?
So the theory behind that is the policy itself is not committing council to any borrowings. The policy is about how we manage the borrowings that occur because of adopted budgets or budget reviews. So the budget or the budget review itself is the one that commits council to a borrowing position. The treasury management policy is simply the mechanism by which we manage our cash. And the policy has a position that we don't actually fix borrowings because at any particular point in time the interest rate is low. We actually fix borrowings to stay within the target ranges, and then simply to reduce our interest rate exposure risk.
That's fair enough, Grant. But
So
what about?
Would you like to speak to that? Can you speak to the microphone a bit closer? Sorry, it's hard to hear you.
Sorry, who do you want to speak?
Yeah, I'm happy for your response, Councillor Stupos.
Oh, thank you. I accept what Grant said, but surely we have ratios that we can't exceed. I mean, there's no point in borrowing more than we can afford. We have liquidity ratios to meet, etc. Why aren't they in policy form as well?
Okay, so they're actually set out in our, we have a separate policy on our budget and budget review process. So that actually sets out those targets. As I said, this policy really just focuses on the management of the borrowings through decisions made through the budget process. So yeah, those target ranges you speak about are in our budget policy.
All right.
Okay, thank you, councillor Stupos. Right, thank you. So, okay, we have a mover and a seconder there in regards to this particular recommendation. I'll ask for a show of hands. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried. Item 13.2.3, the dog and cat registration fees for 2022. Any staff want to speak to this? I take this as being read.
That's read.
Thank you. Are you moving that, councillor Marshall? Thank you. And Deputy Mayor Stone is seconding that. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Show of hands. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried. 13.2.4, the monthly budget report. Did you want to speak to this at all? Take it as read.
Take this read, other than if there's any questions. But obviously, the main thing within this report is that there's a quarterly project update, but most of the other figures are in line with the budget review just adopted.
Happy to move that, councillor Knox?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, councillor Westerman, for that. Thank you. Show of hands, all those in favour? Excellent, that's correct. Right. (13.2.5). This is request to reschedule our June council meeting. Thank you. It's taken straightforward. Thank you, councillor Marshall. You're moving that. Thank you. And seconding that, Deputy Mayor Stone. Thank you. Appreciate that. Ask for a show of hands. All those in favour? Excellent. That is carried.
Ask a question, please.
Yes, you may.
Have we been going to the culture as well?
At this stage, no. At this stage, only myself think, but the CEO can speak to the councillors about that after the meeting, if you wish. Thank you. Right, okay, and we go to 13 point. No, we've done that. So we've had a mover and a seconder. That's done. Thank you. 13.2.6. Page 106. Okay. Right, so this is the exemption from the council's procurement policy for the provision of animal management services. The recommendation is there on the screen. Did any take this as read? I guess I think it's a fairly straightforward report. So if that be the case, councillor Marshall, are you moving this? Thank you, councillor.
I was actually just wanting to either comment or.
All right.
My concern on page 109, I do have no dispute with the RSPCA being involved, and my comments will lead on to when there is negotiations, I would hope. But I'm concerned that the impact on the financial or the potential financial implications by us now being looked at to provide costs for the rehoming of animals. We're almost at $225,000 now. That is one of my concerns, the way we're going down the path as to costs that are going to be offloaded onto local government, in our situation, Whyalla Council, to rehome. But I would like to see included in future reports, as far as this would be, how do other councils, regional and suburban, handle it? I think we're in a no-win situation. The community will see that that's what we should be doing, looking after the poor animals. And I'm an animal lover because we had a cat for almost 18 years. But is it reasonable? What's that extra cost going to be? And how do other authorities handle that? I certainly want that included in the future report of the negotiations. That's my only concern.
No, that's a fair question. Thank you. Yeah, I was going to do that. So you
I'll second it.
have a second.
Yeah.
CEO, would you like to speak?
Yeah, I'll just respond to the question. obviously specifically covers the issue of the extension or the exemption from the procurement policy, specifically in terms
Yes.
of management arrangements. The separate matter that you've raised will be subject to a separate report.
Yes, the only reason I raise it now is that this now gives you the opportunity to go and negotiate.
Okay, and I'll allow you bringing that question up, even though it's not relevant to this particular recommendation, but a good question in itself. Thank you. So we have a mover and a seconder there. I'll ask for a show of hands. All those in favour? Excellent, that's carried. Page 111, 13.2.7, feedback on ESCO's proposed framework and approach. I'm going to ask the CEO if you'd like to speak to this at the moment or take this as read. Do you want to make any comments?
Yeah, this one is a little bit more complex in its nature, so I might ask the Director of Corporate Services just to introduce this subject, and then possibly the Manager of Finance to make some comments.
Yeah, I think that everyone's happy with that. Thank you. Thank you, Kathy.
Yes, thank you through the chair. As part of the local government reforms that are being introduced over the last 12 months and over the next 12 months, the proposed framework for the review of strategic management plans of councils is being introduced. This comes off the back of the previous discussions across local government in terms of rate capping, whereby rate capping certainly wasn't seen as the methodology for oversight of rates of local government to ensure that the infrastructure investment is actually maintained and upheld. So this is a scheme which has been introduced as part of the local government reforms. The proposal that is coming from ESCOSA as an independent reviewing party of rates and strategic management plans of councils. There are some concerns across local government in terms of the methodology that review will undertake. The Local Government Association is certainly consulting with councils, and we as a council have looked at this together with the Audit Committee. One of the comments that I'll make in relation to this scheme is one of the important things will be for ESCOSA not to treat this as a one-size-fits-all for all councils because of the very unique different circumstances that each council has, and also the different circumstances between metropolitan councils and regional councils. Certainly there are different population metrics, different financial metrics, different metrics in the context of the age and useful life left of council assets across the board. So one size fits all is really going to not be a system that would add benefit to councils. However, if this system is actually developed and implemented in a way which shows greater transparencies and gets greater insight and feedback into strategic management plans and rating propositions by council, it certainly has the opportunity to be something that will make a great contribution to local government and a great input into the discussions that councils can have with their local communities in terms of the setting of rates and ongoing financial sustainability. However, again, we do have concerns. The size of the task that is before ESCOSA in terms of data collection and understanding of local government may give rise to a methodology that becomes a one-size-fits-all, and that is one of the concerns. I'll pause there, hand over to Grant for some more specific comments in terms of our concerns with the framework. But we are, just from my perspective, recommending that council do make this submission to ESCOSA, because it's really important that a regional voice be heard in the setting of policies and frameworks of this nature.
Thank you. Grant?
Thank you, through the chair. So I guess this response has been drafted in sort of a couple of steps. So we have received the LGA's original position on the proposal from ESCOSA, and we have actually reading through that, we've supported the LGA's position. the thinking behind that is the LGA have actually been very closely involved in this process and, trying to actually get something within the Act that was good for the sector as a replacement for the original position of rate capping of the local government. And so they understand the legislative, the way it was written, and so they understand where I suppose they have essentially tried to push some of the boundaries of maybe what the legislation is actually trying to achieve, and try to almost increase the scope of what they're actually doing under this review. So, we support the LGA's position on that, and including the fact that while it was only around the figure given in Parliament, there was a discussion of the scheme costing, councils about $20,000 per time that you were reviewed over a 4-year cycle, whereas now the position given by SCOs is that the first round will cost councils $50,000 each, and that's the flat amount. You can imagine it's a big amount for us, but you can imagine what sort of cost that would be for sort of small initial house, that sort of thing. And so then we've also had discussions as an internally as an administration and with the audit committee at last week's meeting, and so we've also incorporated some of those extra concerns, I guess, from Whyalla into the submission that we're making. So, one great point we brought up was around the fact that audit done each year for around $16,000, and that's quite an extensive process, our external audit. And that sort of shows that this cost is three times what our external audit process is, and that might sort of suggest that it's far too high for what is actually trying to be achieved here. But yeah, there were other considerations, like Kathy said, around the impacts on regional councils and even whether it's so to actually have the understanding to undertake this review. And we have said that knowledge might take time to build up, but because of that, they should actually start the scheme as a small thing and build up that understanding, and then over the next cycle, that can become a bigger thing as they actually understand the industry and what that is required of them, because they build up obviously take reviews normally are fairly like things like that, the electricity market or water market, those sorts of things, and so that was obviously much more complex space than most everything else today. So yeah,
You have to move the recommendation.
Yeah, I just want to commend the report too. I think it's so. I thank you, Deputy Mayor is saying a second.
In seconding it, I would too like to commend the authors of the degree of analysis there. Exceptional.
Sorry. Councillor Stupos, have you got a question?
Yeah, several actually.
Okay, thank you.
Number one, in the paper there was no design work as to what the reports are going to look like at the end. I'm very, very curious about that because Kathy was rightfully pointing out that it'd be nice if we could compare apples with apples as opposed to apples with lemons. That's my number one. My number two question was, can we make a recommendation, because all councils aren't the same, we do certain things like every other council, like our rates, bin collection and things like that, that the financial reports be given on that basis. And for those of us that have ancillary type of services that we provide to our community, like an airport services, a cemetery and things like that, that separate budgets are actually prepared for that. And then the combination of all of our budgets together is what gets reported in there. So the people can actually clearly see why our costs are a lot higher than some of the other councils. My last point is that what's the purpose of these reports, and what are these reports going to do? Do they have any teeth? I mean, at this present point in time, I think it's nonsense, because this information that Ms. Goes is looking for is already provided. I mean, they can get access to our audited financial statements each financial year. That gives them the history. So why am I going to pay $50,000 to give them the same information that they can get freely from our website? That's it.
Thank you. Very good questions. I'll hand over to CEO to discuss.
Yeah, so just responding to those three questions or matters that you raised. There has been no um, um, information provided in terms of the form and content of the reports that will be provided. So we are unaware of what the reports will look like. So I think the feedback that we can send to the SCOSA was that would be very evaluating to be able to see what sort of information will be reported. In relation to the second item, I would suggest that the SCOSA would not want to look at adding to the complexity of their reviews of local governments to go down to council by council looking at what services are unique. So whilst the premise of your suggestion, Councillor Soto, makes sense, that would certainly add a lot of time and cost to their work. And probably a fair bit of debate as to what is a unique service versus not so unique service. And then the third item is what is the purpose of the report? So SCOSA's brief is to provide advice, independent advice to councillors. There's a requirement that their advice needs to be reported in our annual business plan and budget, and our annual report as well, I think. So that the advice that they provide to council is available to the community at large. And if they were to make any recommendations, that would obviously be included in their advice. But there is no legislative requirement for council to heed the recommendations that come forward from the SCOSA. Obviously, we would certainly give due consideration to any recommendations, but there's no legislative requirements that we must accept their recommendations, and certainly no statutory requirements or potential penalties if council decides not to accept or makes a decision that may be contrary to SCOSA's recommendations.
Councillor Stupos?
I get that, Justin. My concern is if they give us a negative report, do we have to publish that, or do we get the opportunity to defend their comments? Because our council is totally different from that of Burnside and some of the Adelaide councils with some of our costs, and therefore our rates are going to be slightly higher. I would hate to see a report come from a SCOSA that bags the CPI rise for the Whyalla Council when I think we've got just cause to increase it more than CPI. And that is because of the services that we provide. So if they send us a report and it has to be published and we don't agree with it, well, who's right and who's wrong?
Yeah, through the Mayor. So the only legislative requirement that we have is that we must publish the report. In publishing the report, we would obviously have the discretion and the ability to be able to provide a response in terms of how our annual business plan and a budget or long-term financial plan has had due regard to the advice that we've received from the SCOSA. And if council, which would be obviously the case, if council had good reason to vary or not accept the recommendations or advice from SCOSA because of, for example, the fact that we run an airport and our ability to recover full cost to cover the cost of the airport, for example, is not possible. We could reflect that in our annual business plan and budget and long-term financial plan accordingly.
All right.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Sam?
Also, just for completeness, noting that we would only have a review at this point in time once every 4 years. And I would expect that the requirement to include their advice would be potentially only in the year that the advice is received, or would it be every year?
My understanding is the year that it's received.
Yeah.
No, it's every year.
Through the chair, it will have to be published for 4 years in any business.
Thank you.
Okay. So, thank you for those questions, councillor Stewart. So we've got a mover and a seconder there. Thank you. You got a question, councillor
I've got a
Knox?
question.
Okay,
Or a
thank you.
comment.
Okay.
I just did a quick calculation and it looks like a disclosure will raise something like $3.2 million across councils.
Looking at the 54,000.
A lot of money.
That's why it's been questioned. Okay. Thank you for that comment. Right, so I'll ask for a show of hands for this recommendation. Thank you, that's carried. Thank you. Item 13.2.8, page 195. A report on the internal review of the council's decision on the Whyalla childcare centres absenteeism and cancellation policy. Now, would you like to speak to this firstly, CEO or Kathy? Background to this particular report?
Yes, thank you through the chair. I am also aware that the author of this report, the manager legislation, is online and available to answer any specific questions that members might have. But as members are aware, and as a very high overview, an inquiry or a request to review the council's decision in terms of the childcare centre absenteeism and cancellation policy was received. Section 270 of the Local Government Act does provide a provision whereby decisions of the council can be reviewed, and council's policy in that regard has been followed in undertaking this review. The manager legislation undertook the review after having done a detailed investigation to gather the facts, and the recommendation is before you tonight in terms of that review. I'm not going to go into any further details there. I might ask the manager legislation if she has any comments that she wishes to make prior to council's consideration of the item. Over to you, Andrea.
Thanks, Kathy. Not really. I think you've summed it up, but I would just highlight that there are some quite significant legal issues involved in this particular review, and they have been canvassed in the report.
Okay, thank you for that. So I would ask for someone to move this recommendation. Thank you, councillor Marshall. To second that, councillor Knox. Thank you. Okay. Right, I'll ask for a
Can I just ask a question?
Yes,
I'm just
councillor Knox.
wondering, is it worth meeting with the people who have put submissions in and explaining to them the reasons behind the decision? It might be good public relations. That might not be the response they want, but it could be good public relations if we offer to meet.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea. Deputy Mayor Stone, are you,
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've had trouble coming to grips with this one, trying to work out, I've read everything over and over, and I can be a bit thick at times. I think this is one of them. What's the difference between booking for a week and a fortnight? I think I've got my head around it, but I don't think it's an easy one that the average person can understand. Part of me wants to support this, and part of me wants to support the community, think we're doing the wrong thing. But I'll certainly go with the majority.
yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think that we do need to have a meeting with the people that put in some very good submissions that have been put into that report, I felt. So I think that was what we will arrange. Thank you, CEO, so we can discuss it further, and anyone else that wants to participate in some further discussions. Okay, is everyone okay with that? Okay, so we've got a mover and a seconder. I would ask for a show of hands, all those in favour. That's carried. And I'll ensure that the CEO will get onto that tomorrow. Okay. And that's obviously contact the people that put the submissions into, so we can have further conversation. page 217, 13.2.9. The recommendation is there on the screen. So it's regards the draft Eyre Peninsula Local Government Association strategic. I'll take this report as read. It's really straightforward. Would someone like to move recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Westerman. You seconding that, Councillor Stupes? Thank you. Are there any questions? Leo, would you like to speak?
Just wanted to just make a comment. Just in terms of the recommendation that's put before you, this is a point in time recommendation. So we've been asked to provide some feedback on the strategic plan and your business plan at this point in time. I just want to acknowledge that there is a fair bit of work happening at a regional level in terms of regional planning, and that there's discussions happening not only with the EP-LGA about the terms and functions of the LGA, but similarly there's discussions happening with the RDA, and I think also with planning and land use services in terms of the change to the planning legislation around regional planning boards or bodies. So there's a fair bit of discussion happening around what is happening at a regional level, and noting that our council has a foot in 2 regions. So at this point in time, the recommendation is that we support both the strategic plan and the annual business plan, but did want to make the comment that it will be subject to ongoing review, particularly as some of that other work progresses.
Okay, thank you. So we've got a mover and a seconder there. I'll ask for a show of hands. All those in favour? Okay, right. Item 13.3, city growth. There are no reports, and 13.4, city infrastructure. There are no. Thank you. Item 14 is 14.1 is my list of engagements. Thank you. Right, the recommendation is there. Would someone like to move it? Thank you, Councillor Marshall, and sorry, seconded Councillor Knox. Just for that, thank you. And
Can I ask a question?
of course you can.
In regard to the meeting with the CEO of the RDA, is there any moves afoot to get the CEO of the RDA to come and meet with council?
Yes. Good question, Councillor Knox. Yes, that was part of our conversation at the meeting, and we will be expecting him to come and present to the full council. I think it was probably maybe next month or yeah. Yes.
Through the mayor, we're tentatively looking at the 6th of June.
Yeah.
At the informal elected member briefing, but we're just looking to
Just confirm that date down.
check diaries.
So yes, it was a very positive meeting, and he was very engaging with council, and yes, I think it will be good for him to come and present if you want to meet him and see what his direction is for the RDA Peninsula. Okay, thank you. So I've got a mover and a seconder. Thank you. I'll ask for a show of hands. All those in favour? Excellent. That's carried. Right. Okay. So page 246. We've got notices of motion. There are nil, and questions on notice there are nil. Item 17, questions without notice, and I believe we have some. Yes.
I'm afraid I have 3 questions, Madam Mayor, and I'm
just one moment.
Trying to
just Councillor Deputy Mayor. Just sorry. I'll firstly go with Councillor Marshall.
sorry.
That's okay. No, that's right. Thank you, Councillor Marshall.
Thank you. Just to quickly, wondering why we haven't had street banners in Forsyth and Patterson Street for some time now. So all the other ones at the moment down Nicholson Avenue promoting Cuddle Fest and all the previous events throughout the year, we've had nothing. So I'm just wondering if they can be installed. People asking for the last couple of months.
Take that on notice and get back to councillor to the councillors on that tomorrow. Thank you. Right. Now, Deputy Mayor Stone.
Yes, I guess these are questions on notice. I don't expect answers tonight.
Thank you.
First one, when will the report be submitted to elected members in regards to the disabled access issues at Bennett Oval and the Maritime Museum, including an action plan to move forward? I know it's been discussed previously and I thought the report was supposed to be with us by now. So that's my first question.
Before we get an answer to each of these.
Yep, so would you like to
Yeah,
respond?
through the mayor, we had our manager of assets and planning working on that. Unfortunately, they resigned last week. So we'll need to reallocate that body of work out. We have broken the work down into geographic locations and we're in the process of looking at what could be done from our operational budget and what activities could be done, would need to be done through the capital project side of things to address some of the issues. So that's the report you've been working on.
Can a report be included in the June agenda outlining the progress in catching up on street weed maintenance and further include strategies and actions to ensure such a high backlog does not occur again? Now, in support of that background, I know it could be argued that's operational, but I also believe, and I've raised it before, that it is the sort of thing that many of our residents see as a livability aspect here and now. I don't believe that we put any extra resources in based on our Facebook posts that we put out. And it concerns me that we're coming up to winter again. We will have more rain. I don't want to see us using the excuse again to blame the weather for the weeds. I know it's often seen as dead money, mowing things like that. But our residents are looking at that sort of thing as important to them when they say, what do we get for our roads? So I'd like to, it doesn't have to be an episode of War and Peace, but how is our maintenance program going and what can we do moving forward to ensure that we don't have ugly parts of Whyalla, which does affect the livability visual aspect of trying to get people here to Whyalla.
Thank you. I'll CEO respond to that.
You're not July.
Christian?
Through
Kristen, thank you.
through the mayor, I guess just to note that we do have 2 staff dedicated full-time to street weed spraying. So that's 2 staff working 9-day fortnights, and there are 2 light vehicles with vehicle-based weed spray units that are on them. So they are working full-time as they have done for many years. So that's the service level that we provide around weed spraying. We also try to engage Bedford and there is another community group who helps us with weed spraying, in particular around laneways, and they have indicated to us that they are not able to increase their service level with the people they have, which are volunteers working with them. They are at capacity in terms of taking on more areas for weed spray and indeed hard rubbish pickup. So we are at the limit of what we're able to provide with the resources at the moment.
I'm more concerned about mowing. I took another 2-hour drive through Whyalla today and I do note areas that have since been done since I think I raised this some time ago. You can certainly see the difference in areas and also some street tree planting that's going on. But my concern is our mowing. It's not up to scratch. If we can't control it now, we need to, as a council, be looking at providing more resources because that's what our community wants. There are still some shockingly overgrown areas and it hasn't just happened because of the rains. When you've got real thick bushes of hardwood, and I know how long they take to grow, that's the aspect, particularly in the areas perhaps in our western suburbs, and being narrower streets, it looks more obvious. So I'm more concerned about what's our regime doing that and not looking at it as dead money. If we haven't got enough crews on the road to keep everybody happy, then that's something I believe we have to look at as far as how much money gets allocated to it. I must say, as an aside, I was just absolutely flabbergasted how many supermarket trolleys are dumped in huge numbers. And I feel sorry for the supermarkets because it's not their fault. It's the selfish, lazy residents that just use them one way and then leave them on a corner. So there's up to 20 all congregating. But yeah, my concern is the mowing. We're coming up to winter. If we get another heavy rain, it all goes backwards and we never get on top of it. And we do keep pushing this. We want a livable city. We want the image. The image is not good. And our residents that live in back streets have got the rights to have their footpaths kept as well as our main thoroughfares. Quite sure if some of our senior directors and staff spend an hour driving around the suburbs, you will soon see what I'm on about for those living in those areas. Yes, we cannot control the care or lack of care on private property, but we can certainly look after our streets. So I'm concerned we don't have enough resources, because I think one of our Facebook posts did say that we're working hard as part of the work crew's usual cycle. And I would have thought, because it was such a backlog, we should have had more resources going there. So it's a matter not just for the administration to find money, but for us as a council to acknowledge if this is a problem, and that's what the community want for their livability right now, we've got to solve that problem for the future as well.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I do have one more question.
That's right.
So you started, Deputy Mayor, with a question about street weeds. And during the discussion, you've raised the subject of mowing, you've raised the subject of trolleys, etc., etc. So,
Trolleys to the side.
yeah.
The mowing is part of it.
So my question is, are you actually seeking an increase in service levels, given that the Director of Infrastructure says that we've had the same level of resources committed to providing the current level of service for some time? Are you suggesting that you actually want to increase the service level and you want to report about what the cost implications are to increase the service level? Because there is no additional backlog, because we've had the same level of resources committed to this service for some time. So there's no backlog.
That description. There is a backlog.
No,
There are some very untidy parts of Whyalla that haven't seen a lawnmower for zonks.
okay, so you're talking about an increase in service level.
If we can't vote now, then it's something we all have to address.
Yeah, so I'm just clarifying. So your question without notice is that you actually want a report provided to confirm what the financial implications are to increase service levels from what they are at present, to be able to provide a higher level of service than what is currently being provided. It's been clear in terms
I'm
of...
not referring to a higher level, but an acceptable level.
Okay, well, council...
We get pandemic, but I'm not trying to be hard to get on with or grumpy.
Okay.
Yeah, so...
We're not able to cope with our current resources.
Yeah, so council is the body that sets the service levels. Okay, and you're suggesting that the current service level is insufficient, so the service level needs to be increased, which will require increased resources. So before we provide a report to that effect, I need an indication from the rest of the councillors whether you agree that the service level needs to be increased, because I certainly don't want to allocate resources to prepare a report if the view is that you don't want to spend more money on increasing the service level.
Speech. I think what needs to happen in the short term is perhaps Deputy Mayor Stone can refer the areas that he has seen and that need attention to the CEO and to see whether those areas are going to be attended to in the next it's on the program, just so some clarification from infrastructure. I think we'll start with that and we'll get some results as to your concerns, Deputy Mayor. All right, CEO.
Yeah. Which, coming back to the opening part of the question, was can a report be provided on the June council agenda? I'm going to suggest the answer to that is no, because we need further clarification in terms of where the areas of concern is.
That's exactly right. Thank you. Now, Deputy Mayor, another question?
Final one.
Thank you.
To assist with our budget deliberations, can elected members be advised of staff numbers and wage costs at this time last year, currently, and proposed for 22-23, and further, for comparison purposes, any proposed rate increase information from regional councils in our area and elsewhere, plus perhaps a range of suburban councils, just to give us a better idea of what's happening elsewhere when we have to deliberate for a rate rise.
Okay, so you're asking for some information around other councils' proposed rate increases, just to get a broader picture. Is that correct, Deputy Mayor?
Yes, and our staff numbers, wage costs for last year now, and what's proposed. So give us more to debate at
Yeah, thank you.
decision time.
Take that one on notice. Thank you. Right, thank you. We'll keep moving. Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. Just taking up Deputy Mayor Stone's points, very valid, Deputy Mayor Stone. I think that perhaps if we are going to have a report, it would be actually good to maybe compare perhaps a council like Mount Gambier, which has a huge amount of mowing, weed control, etc., that goes on in that council because of obviously their rainfall, where they're positioned, just to get a little bit of an idea of how they manage that. I know we did this exercise about 10 years ago. We actually went there. And it was one of the things that impressed us the most. It just might be interesting just to get a bit of a comparison and see what they do and how they manage that. I also think we need a scheme, and this was something that we tried to get off the ground some years ago, to empower our community to take more pride in their own, in their footpaths, in their verges. You go to metropolitan areas where they've got beautiful verges, but the council aren't doing all of that. People are actually taking pride in it, even though it is a council piece of land.
So what was your question, Councillor Marshall?
Mainly the one about comparing, getting a bit of information.
So it's not a question, you're actually supporting.
Yes, supporting,
Emails.
it says supporting.
Okay. Cool. Thank you, Councillor Knox.
I've got 4 questions, but just following some of Councillor Stone's comments, which I totally agree with. If we're going to bring a report back to council, why can't we be innovative? Why can't we look at what are the provisions of an enterprise bargaining agreement in terms of the spread of hours? Can we sort of mass those hours out when there's lots of weeds around, we've had rain, and then reduce those hours when we don't need them? So maybe we can think about things like that. But the questions that I've got are, the dog park, who owns the sculpture of the dog park? It's starting to need a lot of maintenance, and I'm curious to know who owns it.
Yep, we can take that.
Certainly there's a lot of rust on it currently, so something's got to be done with it.
Right, just 1 second, I'll get an answer for that.
Thank you through the Mayor. So council is not the owner of that art piece, which means a decision is likely to be made about whether or not we keep it or look to return it to the artist.
Well, we need to get onto that because it is deteriorating. The second question, I've never known I've lived in Whyalla since 1960 pretty much, and I've never seen as many mosquitoes around as we've got currently. Doesn't seem to matter where you go, you've got mosquitoes. I know that in the past council mapped the areas in the mangroves where king tides left behind lagoons, or where major rain events left lagoons as well. We had them all mapped, we used to treat them. Are we still doing that?
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, thank you through the Mayor, and thank you for the question, Councillor Knox. Council currently works and completes its surveillance and control program within the scope of the SA Health Subsidy Mosquito Program. What that in effect does, surveillance is conducted predominantly in the mangrove and the salt marshes area, and treatment does occur monthly from October to March each year. the last treatment that was done of mosquitoes was on the 7th of April this year. We haven't actually received any recent complaints in terms of mosquitoes here at council at this point in time. Although with the cooler air coming through, there is a particular breed or species of mosquito that quite likes cooler air, and so that could well be the result of the influx at this moment in time. But we haven't received any complaints of mosquitoes or increased mosquito numbers at the moment. As I said, we do our surveillance and treatment program within the SAR Health program. If we start to receive complaints, we'll have a look at the nature of the program and look to either expand it or not, dependent on complaints coming in.
I've certainly had complaints. Okay, I'll leave it at that.
Well, that's okay. Perhaps Councillor Knox, if you do get complaints from the members, they need to, obviously there's a process through council, but they can actually put in their concerns via customer service or on the website. Okay, next question.
No, I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you. Okay, so hang on, CEO.
Yes, just seeking clarification. Our standing meeting procedures requires us to record questions and answers in the minutes. Just want to confirm whether councillors wish any of those questions to be included in the minutes. Given their nature, my recommendation is that we wouldn't include them, but we do need to get a resolution not to include them.
So, councillors, are you happy with that suggestion from the CEO? These are just verbal questions and responses, and those taken notice will be delivered, communicated to the councillors.
Need a mover and a seconder not to record them.
So, are we happy for that not to be recorded? Yeah. Okay. Can I have a mover, please, for that? Councillor Simpson, seconder. Someone like to second that? Sorry, I need to. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you. Right, here we go. But a move in a second. Can I have a show of hands? All those in favour? And that's carried. Thank you. Right, item 18, motions without notice. Right. Yep, there are no motions about that. CEO, you may speak.
Just again, through the Mayor, we've been going for an hour since we started, or you raised the subject of potential members of the public providing some feedback on the annual business plan and budget. Maybe if you just do a call out for any of the public who are online, if they wanted to indicate that they wish to speak.
Thank you.
In the absence of that, yes, reflect that there is no speakers.
Thank you. Yes, so as we reach that hour point, are there any people online, any members of the public, did you have any questions, etc. around the annual budget plan? Speak. No? Okay, thank you. There are none. So another hour will have lapsed. Right. Okay. Motions without notice. I don't believe that there are any. No, thank you. So, I think we will break. We'll break now, I think, because we're going into confidential. Thank you. I think so too. All right, so I'd like someone to move that we go into confidential, please. Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Marshall, thank you. Show of hands. All those in favour? Okay, that's carried. And thank you to the members of the public tonight as well. Okay, so as I said, we are now going into the confidential section. So therefore, online, as we have in the past weeks, we'll go into a breakout room and commence that part of our meeting. So thank you very much. And if you want to wait, we will come back up into the public at the conclusion of that consideration of confidential items. Thank you. Right, thank you. Okay, we're now back into procedures and anyone, thanks. Just resolution to, they're up on the screen. Councillor Knox. That's Councillor Marshall. Show of hands, all those in favour? That's carried, thank you. So thank you everyone for tonight's meeting. Just to let everyone know, tomorrow night is the final public consultation for the budget process, which will be held at Mount Laurel.
6 o'clock. We're going to be here at 5. Have you got to hear at 5? I got you at 5.
6 o'clock, that's right. We're meeting with a guy from Energy. 5 o'clock. That's going to be a quick meeting, isn't it? Yes. And out to Mount Laura. 6 o'clock start. Excellent. All right. Okay, so I'll now, the meeting has closed at 8:05.